Well, welcome everyone. I'm so glad to have you all here. We may still have a few people join us as the day continues, but I'll start by introducing myself and have Matt introduce himself as well. But my name is Kelsey Derringer. I'm the co-founder of CodeJoy. We are an online education company. We teach coding and robotics remotely, primarily. However, we have also done a number of different maker and engineering education camps, and we're going to talk to you a little bit about our experience doing a few different camps. We're going to talk about a few different case studies of things we've been involved in. And really, as you all are preparing for your summer making, learning, teaching situation, I'm sure we're all in very different situations, but the common thread here is you're doing something virtually. Your kids are joining you virtually somehow. And you're thinking, oh man, I've got 30 kids or 10 kids or 300 kids joining me on Zoom or YouTube or something, and I need to figure out how to do this dang camp. So we're going to introduce you to a few questions that we've come up with to ask ourselves as we've been doing these online camps that have led to better and better outcomes for us and the camps that we've created that we want to share with you guys. So I'll bring Matt on screen as well. This is Matt.
Hello.
He's not mic'd. That's why he's only running on screen for a moment and then running back off. However, he is represented by a cardboard robot avatar named Matt the Robot. Hi, Matt the Robot.
We're not very clever with our names here, but so this is how I usually come into the classes. I have a microphone sort of behind the scenes. But yeah, I'm the other half of CodeJoy. I take care of a lot of the technical stuff behind the scenes. So when we get around to answering technical questions, if there are any, I may have some helpful answers for you.
Absolutely. And so we'd like to know just a little bit about you all who's here, and we'd love it if you would type that in the chat. We're going to use the chat really liberally today, so you should get used to using it. It's a great place to participate. But if you would, tell us in the chat what you're doing this summer. Where you're doing it. So I'm doing a 30-kid maker camp in British Columbia or wherever you're joining from. We'd love to know a little bit about you guys. While you're typing that, want to share a little bit of information about Maker Camp and what Maker Camp itself is. So we are CodeJoy, we are our own company, but we are one of the featured makers for Maker Camp this summer. So Maker Camp has looked different in 2019 and 2020 and 2021 because the world looked very different in 2019, 2020, and 2021. So Maker Camp this year is really a set of free resources for anyone in the world to use with kids. So whether you are a library working with a group of 30 drop-in kids once a week on Zoom, or you're a parent with a pod of 6 second graders on a block in San Francisco, whatever you're doing, Maker Camp is really a set of free resources that includes curriculum, live synchronous, so sessions and experiences. That's what CodeJoy is doing this summer. As well as materials. Now the materials you can either purchase or there are a few sponsored kits as well, but there's a kit full of materials that you can get to work with this summer as well. And all of that is located, we'll share a link in the chat for Maker Camp. So if you guys want to learn a little bit more about Maker Camp, you can. It's free to become a community partner for Maker Camp. So I highly recommend that you become a community partner because all it costs is like 15 minutes of you filling out a survey, which we're educators, we fill out surveys all the time. That's nothing for us, right? So it's just fill out that survey about who you're serving this summer, and then you get access to all this cool stuff like synchronous sessions like this content online, all kinds of cool connections with great makers from around the world as well. So that's Maker Camp this summer. We're going to talk about Maker Campus, the learning platform, in just a little bit as well. But Matt, do you want to read out what some of the folks have been saying in the chat, who they're working with this summer?
Sure. So Mary Elliott is running a makerspace in Bellingham, Washington. It's going to be running a hybrid Maker Camp aimed at middle schools. And they're enrolling, but hoping to hit about 60 kids, so cool. Working with pretty large groups. Kelly is going to be working with 50 kids in a maker camp in New York City.
Awesome.
Lily is first time hosting a maker camp located in the San Francisco Bay Area. So far, groups of mixed ages, 7th graders and 3rd graders, essentially large groups of kids and friends.
Hey, that's awesome, Lily. I love that you've got a multi-age group there. That's going to be so fun. Awesome.
Yeah, absolutely. And Kelly's also going to be working from a library virtually.
Cool.
And then Jennifer is on Martha's Vineyard doing camps from Vineyard Haven Public Library. Most of the programs are going to be virtual / take home.
Very cool. This is great. This is great. I'm so glad to know who's here, to know what you guys are going to be up to this summer. And please feel free as we go, use that chat liberally to chime in. And we'll kind of call on you guys too if you're comfortable unmuting. Actually, would you all use the little emojis down below just for a second? If you're comfortable unmuting at any point today, would you give me a thumbs up? If you're not comfortable being asked to unmute, give me like a party, like celebration thing. So thumbs up from a couple people. Give me a little party hat. If you're not comfortable unmuting, cool. That is great. Awesome. Cool. That's a technique that we use a lot during our online camps to do a quick survey of the camp, see who's comfortable with what. Awesome. Okay, cool. So we're gonna, like I said, take you through a few questions as you're designing your camp's curriculum, designing your lesson plans, figuring out how you're gonna pull this whole thing off this summer. A few questions that we have gone through in some of the experiences that we've had over the last year and a half specifically. So some of these are going to seem a little bit general, but then we're going to kind of zoom in and get more and more specific with them. But our first question that we ask ourselves when we're approaching a camp is, what are your resources? So it sounds like a really general question, but really, this is what's going to give you your constraints, your limits on what you're designing for camp. And I do want to acknowledge that, like, although we are kind of hosting this session right now, we are not the only experts here. You yourselves are experts as well. So please, if you have things to add, feel free to either unmute and jump in or put things in the chat and like add to everything that we're presenting, please. But in terms of resources, you can kind of think of resources in terms of a few kind of categories. So you've got first your materials. Are your kids going to have materials, or are they not going to have materials? And Carrie, welcome back. Really glad to have you again. Carrie was with us last night too. But in terms of materials, what are they going to have access to? So do the kids have things at home? Did they come pick those up from the library? Or are they going to be asked to go around their house and gather some stuff? Or is it totally materials free? You're not going to ask that they have anything besides a device to join on. Second is people. Who do you have that can help you run stuff? What other staff do you have available to you? What people do you have that could join you on Zoom and help you manage things in the background? Do you have parent volunteers that you could call on? And lastly, technology. What do you have in your space as far as cameras and computers go? So these are kind of general categories, but I figured we could kind of present these in terms of 3 case studies that we've done to kind of talk through how these 3 different camps looked and felt way different because they had different constraints on them. So one that we're going to talk about, which may look similar to what you're trying to do this summer, is we were working for UC Berkeley last summer, and we're doing it again this summer too, doing a camp called Girls in Engineering. So last year, it was about 200 middle school girls joining us on Zoom 5 days a week for 3 hours a day for 6 weeks straight. That's the face I made too, Mary. Yeah, that was insane. Why did we do that? It was the beginning of the pandemic. We thought everything was possible. And it was. It was actually a smashing success, but it was also complete insanity. But what were we working with here? What materials did they have? Well, the campers, they were all local to the San Francisco Bay Area, actually. So even though we're located in Pittsburgh, they had access to materials because they could swing by Berkeley, pick up a kit full of materials. They'd like drive up, they'd pop the trunk, they'd put it in, everyone was masked, you know, they'd drive off, they'd check them off, right? So the kids had materials, which was awesome because there was a common sort of, we know you've got this because we gave it to you, right? So that was great. The people that we had, there were a lot of people resources that came to bear on this one. It was me and Matt. Plus, there were 5 teaching assistants, so they were like undergrads who were being paid to be there. Plus, we had 10 adult volunteers on every call. So that meant that we could do multiple breakout rooms and have 2 adults in the breakout room at all times. And that was really because like Berkeley is a giant university bureaucracy that can call on people. They have people resources. They can be like, you show up, and this undergrad will be like, yep, I'm reporting for duty. Like they can tell people to do stuff and people do it, right? So that was awesome to have that. And what technology did we have? Well, we had our studio. And so this is actually a point where I'm gonna pause just briefly to give you guys a tour of our studio in just a moment. But in our sort of well, we'll give you a tour of our studio and then we'll give you some tips that go along with it. So I'm going to cut to our behind the scenes camera. This is what our studio looks like when you're not looking through the camera lens. So you can see I'm surrounded by wires and cameras and lights. If you look up a little bit, there's a metal grid that all of this stuff is hanging from. This looks very technical, and it is. It's basically like we are a TV studio. Basically, there's where Matt sits, and there's our soundboard and everything. Then Matt's dinner, East Coast dinner time, what? But there's his like robot board. So here's where I stand over here. My little teaching table. We have underneath here all of our craft supplies and stuff is kind of hidden underneath here. So our pencils and scissors and stuff like that. But then we also, and there's where we keep robots and boxes and more craft supplies. But when you look over there, off to the side, we have an entire other half of our studio where we can do interesting, larger demos and sets and things. So this is actually set up for a class called Robot, Paper, Scissors, where LB the Robot, stands for Little Bot, LB the Robot and Mr. Hand face off in an epic game of Robot, Paper, Scissors. It's very silly. But that's over there. We have a little tool area, an extra work area. But this is actually a 2-car garage in the heart of Pittsburgh. So this is a literal garage that we work from. That's what our studio setup is. For our studio, we actually have 7 different cameras that we have set up. One's in front, one's in the top down. One is a side view. It's mounted to the side of my desk, so we can take a different look at things like, hey, how's LB made? Let's take a look inside him, like that. We have the studio camera is over here. That's the one that has all the frame is set up around this studio camera. We have how many is that? That's 5 or that's 6. Okay, so here's this. Oh, there's Matt the Robot's camera. This one is actually a camera mounted behind this hole so that when I lean down to talk to the robots who live behind my wall, I can say hi to them and chat with them and stuff. But that's mounted behind that hole back there. Plus we have the ability, instead of screen casting, we can just cut to a screen, what is this called, Matt? Display capture.
Right.
So we've got multiple monitors, and so we can show what's happening on our display. So we have, I believe you call this overkill. It's a lot, right? So we have a lot of resources, a lot of technology in our studio. But depending on what your goals are, the cameras that we use the most all the time are the front and the top down. And because we're using some free software called OBS, we can also do a side-by-side, which I think this is super helpful if you're doing any kind of engineering or maker activities, because I can make eye contact with you, we can really be having a great discussion, and you can be seeing what I'm doing here. So, as you're figuring out how to set things up, a document camera and your webcam, if you're going for bare bones, you can do a lot with just 2 cameras, right? Or you can get fancier, do different kinds of cameras. Our camera has the ability to zoom in or out, so there's different cameras with those capabilities. But so our studio, we have 7 cameras, but depending on what you're going to be doing, 2 could be great. Or, you know, we also use Matt's phone as a camera that gets uses something called NDI that goes into OBS. But like, it kind of depends what you want to do with your camp. Or if you're teaching jumping jacks, you may need a 3rd camera far away. You may need a camera person, right? We were working with the Boys and Girls Club of Dayton last year, and they were doing these like sports shorts. So the kids would log in and they'd like do 10 minutes of PE together and like log out, and it was great. So they needed that. Okay, I'll show you what OBS looks like. Here we go. So this is what OBS itself looks like, just a brief overview. OBS is a piece of software, like, you know, Zoom, you download Zoom as a piece of software on your computer. So OBS, what it allows us to do is that we can create different scenes. We're like, here's our master scene, which is that master camera. I can go to our top down, I can go to the close up here, I can go to the screen cap, which is gonna look crazy because it's an infinite loop of things looking at each other. Here's the studio camera. But then what I can also do is through OBS, you can even set up scenes that are like the master and the top down. So we've got, you know, the front camera, the top down camera, we've got a gray line that separates the 2 of them. But we could go to like master and display or master and hand close up, things like that. So there's all kinds of different scenes that we can create there. And this is what I think is really important. You can use something called hotkeys, which is, you've probably used hotkeys on something else before, but I can, just by hitting like Control-1, go to the front camera. Control-2 goes to the top down. Control-3 goes to the side camera. So it's really smooth for me to switch to my different cameras or to switch to my different scenes. Alt-2 takes me to the split screen here. Alt-4 takes me to this split screen. So it just makes it really smooth, especially for if I want to share my screen to do like coding or something. I don't actually have to screen share. I am right now to show you what the system itself looks like, because we're like, this is like looking behind the curtain. But we never use screen share because we just use our screen cap function.
And one other, if I might, one other benefit of OBS is that we could also drop in videos, right? So pre-recorded videos. So here's our little like
video
intro.
for What is CodeJoy?
But you know, this is how we get started. But this could just as easily be a video about, you know, electrical engineering or something like that. So.
Yeah, which we were doing this morning. So OBS is a great piece of software. It's a big piece of software. It can do a lot. And how many years have you been working with OBS, Matt?
I guess since 2016.
Okay, so like
Yeah.
5 years. And when's the last time you learned how to do something new on OBS?
They just had an update earlier this week, actually. So all new things, and it's a wonderful piece of software. It is totally open source, which is really cool. Which just means that there's a lot of stuff getting added to it at all the times. Yeah, its benefit is also its drawback. There's a ton you could do.
It can do everything, but everything is a lot of things. So knowing where to start, I mean, where to start would just be like get it to recognize 3 cameras. And then what it does for you, basically, to answer Carrie's question, is, okay, so what hardware are you using to manage all 7 of those video streams? We're just using OBS. They all go in through you know, your HDMI, and we're using something called a cam link, because the type of camera that we're using to get this really crisp, clear video is actually a DSLR. So they're like pretty fancy time cameras. Here, I'll cut to that behind the scenes. So this is a beefy old DSLR with a beefy lens on it. And honestly, you don't need this much for Zoom, because Zoom compresses your video anyway. So this is like a 4K camera. It produces really good images, but Zoom compresses it to 720 anyway. It's 1080, that's right.
It's decent, but
yeah,
we're not.
but it compresses it anyway. So you don't need something quite that beefy. We make our own recordings as well. So like the fact that we make recordings on OBS, you can use it to record videos too. So the fact that we we use it to make recordings, we can record in really great detail. And OBS takes all of those videos, smushes it into one stream, and now Zoom is using my OBS virtual camera, is what that's called, is using my OBS virtual camera as the camera. So it takes multiple video streams and makes them into one thing going out from your computer.
So once you load OBS on, OBS virtual camera becomes one of your camera options in Zoom or Google Meets or most other video-based platforms.
Yeah. Awesome. So please continue as we're going on. If you guys have more technical questions about our studio or what you could do for your studio, please continue with those. I'm going to come back to our case studies a little bit though, because we were talking about, okay, the first question that we ask ourselves when we're designing a camp is, what are your resources? And so we were talking about the resources that we had for girls in engineering were a lot. We had a lot of people. The kids actually had their own materials. We had this great studio to use. We had some major resources. We had some major other constraints, right? Which was 200 kids, 3 long hours on Zoom, 6 full weeks. I wouldn't recommend doing that. It was a lot. We did it, but it was a lot. But here's another case study of another project that we worked on, which was Family Maker Camp 2020. For Family Maker Camp, we had much smaller groups. We had like 10 to 15 kids who could sign up. They were with us live on Zoom, and then we were streaming that out to YouTube. But we were only ever really talking to 10 to 15 kids. Other kids could watch live or could watch after the fact. So if you search Make and Code Joy on YouTube, you'll find all of those from last year. But what materials did we have? We didn't send the kids any materials because they could sign up an hour beforehand. They could sign up 5 minutes beforehand and still come. So the materials that they had access to were only whatever they had at home. So we made box puppets out of cereal boxes, and we made catapults out of spoons, and we made flowers out of paper. We made all kinds of cool stuff, but we had to limit ourselves to what a kid anywhere could reasonably have at home, and we had to come up with like 2 or 3 substitutions, like toilet paper rolls. Oh man, if you don't have a toilet paper roll, okay, go grab a newspaper. Or like we had to really help them engineer through if they didn't have those materials. So on the one hand, easier to manage because we weren't like shipping materials anywhere, but on the other hand, harder because we didn't know what they had, you know? Really, cardboard, tape, scissors. Everybody had that, and everything else we had to vamp on. That was insane. What people did we have? For those, we had Matt and myself, Matt as Matt the robot, and me as Kelsey. But we also always had an expert. So one of the things that I heard someone say in a forum that I was in earlier this year was, when you're teaching online, do the thing you can't normally. You can't normally bring experts in from anywhere to come help you teach your class, but virtually you can. So like, call in all your favors to talk to cool people, right? So we had a puppeteer from here in Pittsburgh who was coming to us live from his puppet making studio. So he would like hold up a glass eye and be like, this one's going in this marionette. But so we had a puppeteer. We did a lesson on cam mechanisms. So we got the kids to make cam mechanisms to turn rotational energy into up and down energy. And we had my friend who lives on a farm show us how to saddle a horse and then ride it, because she had that up and down energy. So we zoomed from the back of a horse. We couldn't do that from a library, but we could because we were on Zoom, right? So doing the thing you can't was super cool. It was great to call in those experts to give it that extra context. And our tech was still our studio. Still speaking of resources, our last one that I want to share with you guys is our Code Joy classes. These probably have the most constrained resources of any that we've worked on, which is, so in our classes, our goal was we want to get kids doing robots who don't have robots. We want kids to be controlling robots and engaging in robotics without ever having access to a physical robot. So the materials that they had, we assumed that they only had a laptop and computer. We assumed that they'd never done anything with coding and robotics before. We assumed that we had to design an experience similar to you, it sounds like, Kelly. In these other ones, in Girls in Engineering and Family Maker Camp, we could see and hear the kids. In this one, we were designing it for a webinar. so that we could not see or hear the kids. And in fact, we made it so that their chats could only come to us because it was open for anyone in the world to join, and we were terrified of some weirdo posting weirdo stuff in the chat. So we locked down the chat so they couldn't talk to each other, they couldn't see or hear each other, we couldn't see or hear them, they could only chat to us. Yeah, Jennifer. Oh, you're good. But so we have some major constraints with that. The people, we didn't want to rely on anybody else. We wanted it to be something that just me and Matt could do. And the tech, again, was our studio. But the way that we got this to work out is that we were using hyperlinks, sharing hyperlinks back and forth, so that the kids would write code and then they would send their make code file to us and we'd download that onto our robots. We've since refined that and we have our own website, our own sort of like, is it API? That's the word I'm looking for? Yeah, we have our own API that we've been working with a developer so that the kids log in and they can code our robots pretty instantaneously with like a sub 1 second delay, which is pretty cool. If you want to learn more about these classes, we're doing a session on Thursday where we'll show you what these live classes are like, and we'll take you through one of them, and your kids can actually sign up to attend these classes for free if you are a MakerCamp community partner. So that's one of the benefits of being a MakerCamp community partner, is attending these sessions. They're Monday through Friday for 5 weeks in a row. So you can sign up to attend those. But we put some major constraints on ourselves with these. We want you to do robotics without a robot or any other materials of any kind. It could be 10 kids, it could be 200 kids could join, and we need to make sure it's secure so that literally anybody can join. So even if they don't even have the materials, it's still possible to do a great maker camp and experience. But as we're talking about materials, we're going to kind of focus in on these 3 case studies from our experience and kind of reference these as we continue forward. So that was all. This was probably the biggest, beefiest part of what we're going to share today, is what are your resources? That's going to tell you what your constraints are. This is what you've got to work with. Limit yourself to that, but give yourself the best fighting chance, especially like parent volunteers. They may still, even though we're a year and a half into a pandemic, they may still be just chomping at the bit, ready to help you out, to have a great experience, and to do something with their kids, you know. Okay, so our second question that we're always asking ourselves when we're designing curriculum, which I'll encourage you guys to do too, is what are the kids doing? Like, pick a verb, right? Are they listening? Are they taking pictures and sending them to you, Kelly? Are they making something? Are you expecting them to actually be making something? This is your like criteria, right? So if this question, what are your resources, if those are your constraints, your limits on what you can do, what are the students, what do you want them to actually do? That's your criteria. That's how you're going to measure your success. Did they make a circuit? Great. Did they post a picture and tag you on Twitter? Okay, they did it, right? Like, what do you want them to be doing? And is it more like listening, sort of passive, watching? Is it more active, like using the chat a lot for certain things? What are the kids actually doing? And to that end, there's a lot of options. It sounds like a lot of you are going to be doing like live synchronous camps, but there's a lot of options for asynchronous things as well. Matt, if you would find those Hummingbird tutorials.
Sure, you bet.
Just to give you an example of what asynchronous things can look like. They can look like YouTube videos, you know, you like making a little video. These are especially useful for like step-by-step things. If you want every kid to make the same thing. We had the Moon Makers on yesterday. Raise your hand or give me a thumbs up if you've heard of the Moon Makers. Have you heard of these two? They're amazing. Mary knows. They're amazing. They're this brother-sister maker duo out of Mexico. Faust knows as well. They are awesome, and they make these fantastic YouTube videos. Plus, they're youths themselves, so like they're like talking to their people, which is just awesome. I love them. They're totally amazing. And they make only asynchronous content. So we're familiar with what YouTube videos can look like, right? You can put a lot of time into editing them. You can just kind of get it out in one take as best you can and post it there. But a benefit of asynchronous videos, if kids are going to be doing step-by-step stuff, is they can work at their own pace. So they can like go through it, pause it, go back, zoom in, cock their head. What is she doing there? Oh, right. Okay, now I'll play the whole thing again. Because when you're live, you can only go as fast as your slowest maker. And if you have 10 kids who are all in the same grade, well, they're going to be going a pace with each other. If you've got some 3rd graders and some 7th graders, you're going to have to go as slow as your slowest maker, right? So if you're doing step-by-step stuff, that can really get bogged down if you're doing it live. But asynchronous, we want to show you a quick example of what asynchronous can look like. It doesn't have to just be a YouTube video. It could also be something like this. These are some tutorials that we made for BirdBrain Technologies. We both used to work for them, but I'll unmute this really quick and just play a flavor of what this is.
Hello, I'm Kelsey Derringer, and I am the Professional Development Coordinator for BirdBrain Technologies.
And I'm Matt Gilbert. I'm the Learning Media Producer for BirdBrain Technologies.
And in today's self-paced video course, we're going to do 3 things. We're going to teach you how to use your Hummingbird with a laptop or a Chromebook and MakeCode as your programming language. We're going to teach you how to navigate around our site so that you can find what you need to be able to teach with your Hummingbird. And we're going to teach you that robotics, especially with Hummingbird, is really fun, really easy, and really for everyone.
So in these tutorials, these videos themselves were pretty short. We were using OBS to do this, to record, to talk about what a robot is. And then the videos themselves, these short videos, they were lined up one after another so that this one was all about setting up your robot. This one was all about how to code an LED to blink. So what blocks do you need to drag out to get your LED to blink? And hey, here we go. We've got an LED blinking. So it takes you through that process. There's little challenges built into it. Here's some like making hacks with an LED of what, how you can make with it. But these little, they were very modular. If you think about a module as a small self-contained thing, there was these little modular videos. It's a great way to organize information because, again, they can just go at their own pace. So making little video modules was something that we got really good at and is such a great support for any camp that you're doing because there's some things that are better live and some things that are better asynchronous, right? To that end, so some reasons for things to be live might be like maybe you've got an expert on there and they're only going to have this access to this expert for a little bit of time. So like it's a great time for them to have questions. So what they're doing is asking questions in the chat. Maybe it's for building community, and so they're going to get to connect with people they otherwise wouldn't have. So what they're doing is going into breakout rooms and talking, unmuting. That's what they're doing. Maybe it's that the viewers have real-time control over something, that you're making an art piece using techniques you've just taught them, and they're going to, in the chat, give you suggestions, and you're gonna do that. There is this great online educator his name is Dr. Sparks. He was part of Maker Camp last year as well. And he would get kids to tell him stories and he would type it up on an old-fashioned typewriter. And there was another woman who'd zoom in from Washington and she would illustrate them live. And so by the end of a half an hour, these kids would have an old-fashioned, one-of-a-kind typed up story and a drawing, and those would both get mailed to the kids through the physical mail at the end. So like, that is a one-time only experience, and that was a great use of being live. But a great question is like, should this be live? If they're just listening, if they're doing step-by-step stuff, maybe it should be asynchronous. Should this be asynchronous? Would they get something from it more if it was live? So like, what are the students doing can guide your answers to should this be live or asynchronous. Let me pause here. Do you guys have any questions, comments, things to add at this point? Have any of you had any experience making asynchronous content for YouTube or for your sessions?
We did, just as part of our library programming, we did a lot of asynchronous programming. We did a story time, a cooking segment, a STEAM project, and a craft project every week.
Oh,
all
wow.
through the summer and the fall winter.
Mm-hmm. So that was all live, you said?
No, it's all asynchronous.
All asynchronous. Oh, okay.
Yep. It's all up on YouTube.
That's great. That's great. If you
Yeah,
want to
we
drop
did it on Facebook.
feel free to drop your YouTube channel in the chat. I think we'd all love to
Okay.
get some inspiration from the other experts that we have here. So
Sure.
that goes for everybody.
If
Nope.
please go ahead, Carrie.
I was just going to say I've been doing a little bit of both live and asynchronous. Been the asynchronous stuff where I'm just about to put out like a learn to solder tutorial video. And then for the live stuff, I've mostly been doing live streaming, although I have like a tiny bit of experience with being like a guest and doing a little workshop with students. So yeah, I'm definitely trying to think of how to do step-by-step physical workshops live a little better without being kind of limited in that way by, you know, one or two people that are maybe lagging behind, like still being able to manage like a fun activity for a group.
Yeah, doing those step-by-step things live. Honestly, one of the things that we started doing was starting with an unmake. So like if we were wanting them to make something, we'd have one of the things, whatever it was, like the mechanism or whatever, already made, and then we would unmake it on camera. So disassemble it and lay out all the pieces. And then we'd do it all in reverse order. And that way we're like, okay, so start whenever you want. We're gonna do this at a certain pace here. Feel free to work ahead or work behind, but like here's how it's all put together. So that was one thing that we found when we were trying to do those step-by-step things live that seemed to really help, was have a pre-made one, unmake it, and then let them kind of follow it back through. Hey, thanks, Jennifer. I'm excited to check out your YouTube channel. That's great.
And Mary, was that comment about the soldering kits, was that for Carrie? Yeah.
Are you sending out your soldering kits for kids, Carrie?
I haven't done that quite yet. I do have like a little Happy Rain Cloud circuit board that's a pretty good like learn to solder circuit board. It just has a few components on it and automatically blinks once you put the batteries in. And so I do have those like up on a Tindy shop, but that's kind of what I'm prepping for, is to be able to do something like that live and ship the kits out ahead of time and, you know, have it all scheduled.
Yeah, shipping things out live can be challenging. However, one other resource to help with that materials piece is Maker Campus, actually. Matt, could you pull up Maker Campus off to the side?
Yeah.
So Maker Campus, hey, here it is. Maker Campus, I'll go full screen with it, is just an awesome place where educators can do trainings and stuff. We are one of the educators who does things on Maker Campus, but if you're looking for cool opportunities, Maker Campus is looking for cool educators. So Sienna says, yeah. Feel like this is a really cool, there's a really cool thing. So for example, like these juggling balls, right? You can, if you sign up, they've got like, here's what you're gonna need. But once you sign up, like once I like bought a ticket to go to this, and you can either do it, you know, for free or a charge or whatever. You as the runner of the class, you can put together like an Amazon shopping list that people can then click on and be like, okay, I've got that, I've got that, I've got that. Oh, I don't got that. Okay, and they can just order it on Amazon. So like, you know, putting together a kit and shipping it out is a totally valid thing to do, but also you can just make them put together their own kit because shipping stuff sucks. So it's a giant headache and no one likes to do it. So, you know, putting together an Amazon shopping list yourself or, you know, hosting something through Maker Campus is a great option too. And you'll get clients from all over because Make has people all over. You could use their network, you know, which is pretty cool. Oh, that's a great idea. Mary says, I've made a bill of materials on DigiKey before for people to have a one click to pick up components. That's a great resource. Okay, so I'm conscious of time here as well. I want to hit our last question, and then maybe we'll have some more time for other questions at the end. But continue submitting those and continue putting your resources in the chat. The chat's a great rich place to add to what we're talking about. So our last question that we ask ourselves is, okay, what are we trying to communicate, or what are we trying to do? Again, a very general question, but we've found that things kind of exist on like a continuum. So I'm going to do full top down here. So what are we trying to communicate? There's kind of like, pretend there's a slider bar here in between presenting info and creating community. It's a scale, right? So are you trying to tell them stuff, or are you trying to make them feel seen and heard? Are you trying to show them things, or are you trying to listen to them? Right? Like, what are you trying to do for your campers? It's not a dichotomy. You can do both, right? But within a camp, you can do both. But within a given moment, we've found that it's really helpful to figure out, are we trying to listen to them or are we trying to talk to them? So that we're not muddying the waters. And something that we've found, this is a mantra that we've told ourselves, especially as like online virtual educators, which is good education is good entertainment. And that can be a little controversial for some teachers, especially if you're like used to having a full classroom and everything. But the reality of being a teacher on Zoom or virtually is you don't have a full classroom full of ambiance. You have a 13-inch screen to keep their attention. And over here, there's their little brother. And over here, there's a very fluffy cat. And right there is their bed. And all of those seem like great options if this is kind of boring. Right? And like you can be presenting really interesting information, but if you're not entertaining them, there's a cat right there. And like you can't compete with a cat. You can't. Doesn't matter how good your maker activity is, right?
Mary wants to see the cat.
Right. I want to see the cat. We all do. We all do. Honestly, one of our other little like mantras was like, be more interesting than a cat butt, because every time somebody's cat jumps up on the call, everyone's like, a cat butt! Be more interesting than a cat butt. That's our goal. But you've only got a 13-inch screen, or if kids are joining from a phone, you might have a 4-inch cracked screen with crap Wi-Fi. That may be how they're interacting with you. So we try to be entertaining. So when we're entertaining, what does that look like? Well, that looks like our studio here is sort of visually interesting. That looks like me cutting to Matt the robot.
Hey, how's it going, everybody? Just wanted to switch up the voice real quick so you guys wake back up.
Yep. So another thing, switching up your auditory landscape can be really helpful because, you know, I was a theater minor. I know how to use my voice. I warm it up every morning and I try to be really interesting to listen to. But the fact is, you're going to tune me out after a while because it's one voice still talking. So I've got this like feminine theater voice and Matt has this dude voice.
What's up?
Yeah. So, switching up your vocals, even just having somebody else to spotlight or elevating one of your volunteers to talk about how to dispose of materials at the end of the day, or, you know, giving other people little jobs so that you can cut to them almost like on the news, right? And now to you for this segment, and now to you for that segment. Switching up the vocals, switching up the visuals. That's another reason we have all these cameras, is we're doing the same thing that filmmakers are doing. When they cut scenes, they're trying to bring your attention back to the movie because you have got popcorn and popcorn's awesome. Oh, something just changed, right? We're doing that, but with, okay, look here, look what I've got. No, look here. All right, come check this out. Oh, nope, look back here, everybody. Ooh, look at that, something more interesting to look at, right? So we're cutting between our cameras for the same reason that movie makers and TV makers do that too. Other things to switch up your landscape are show some videos sometimes, again, to switch up the auditory and the visual landscape, and see if you can use music. So for example, we've got a song that we use somewhere. There we go. We've got some songs that we often will use to signify like, hey, it's working time now, or it's coding time now. We'll bring in a little song of some kind to kind of indicate that. And we've found that that can be really effective for just, again, bringing their attention back to the task at hand. You could also use, you know, Spotify, things like that. But, Carrie has a great question. Does anyone have some favorite sites for open source music? I know Matt's always getting music for cheap from somewhere.
Yeah.
What do you use for
I usually go to Video Hive is what it's called, and you could sort of search. It's got sort of a subcategory called Audio Jungle. But if you go to Video Hive and set up an account there, for relatively cheap, usually between $8 and $30, depending on often the quality of the track, you could usually buy some royalty-free music
Support an artist.
license for it. Yeah, and support artists at the same time.
That being said, it's usually only good for you should know if it's good for one use or multiple uses, right?
Absolutely, we discovered that. McLeod. Oh, what's his name? Brian McLeod on YouTube. Is it Brian? A lot of the open source music that you're hearing is actually from one person who generously gives away all their music on YouTube. I'll connect you all to his channel.
Yeah. But using music like that is another way to indicate that something has changed. During Girls in Engineering, we use music. So again, this summer it's 3 hours long, and every hour or so we have a break. And during those breaks, it's always a 2-song break. The first song, Matt plays a little saxophone. If you want to grab your saxophone,
Sure.
Matt plays saxophone covers of pop music. So that indicates to them, so here's Matt's little saxophone. So that's an audio cue that we use. But when we come back from that break, when that song ends, we say, all right, everybody, turn your cameras back on and let's have a dance break. And then we'll play Katy Perry or something, and now we're having a big dance party to get them up and moving, right? But even in that, we are asking ourselves, are we presenting info or are we creating community? Because during those dance breaks, we actually spotlight campers that we see are dancing. So we're creating community there. We're not presenting information. But on that note of creating community, if you do have a camp where you can see the campers like you're on Zoom, I highly recommend using breakout rooms to create community, because if there's more, we've found the limit is about 10. If there's more than 10 people on a call, no one unmutes, ever. They just don't do it. So that's especially true for kids. But if you can limit that breakout room to 6 to 10 kids and a couple of adults, if you've got those resources, then they'll start chatting with each other, right? So those breakout rooms are for work time. They're for doing rosebud thorn sharing activities for the kids to share their projects in that breakout room. That's where they're creating community. But when we pull them back to the main room, we're presenting info. And in fact, in Girls in Engineering and the project we did for UNICEF last year, we are most often in this place of presenting info because we have all this stuff and we're really good at this. And anybody can be really good at this, right? You don't need a lot of technology to be good at creating community, right? You can make a collaborative playlist. That's awesome, Kelly. We've done that for Girls in Engineering. We just have to vet it to make sure there's no curse words. Some of them sneak in there. That happened once this summer already.
Twice?
But Katy Perry letting us down. Didn't have an E next to the song. But yeah, letting kids add songs to a collaborative playlist is a great way to create some community, even during those breaks and things. Our mantra for us is good education is good entertainment. But also good education can be good listening. How do you listen on Zoom? We found that breakout rooms are a great place to do that. And even pulling kids to and from breakout rooms is a way to get them to re-engage. It's just cutting a camera, except they have to click something, right? Yeah, lo-fi music's great for working too, absolutely. So as an overview, I'm going to kind of zoom way out here. Our three questions that we are always asking ourselves are, okay, what are you trying to communicate? So are you trying to present information or create community? You can't do both at the same time very well, but you can create segments, like news segments kind of, in any lesson to do both of these. What are the students doing? Are they talking, watching, making, posting? chatting, right? And when you figure out what they're supposed to be doing, that can guide you as to whether this would be good live or asynchronous, right? And then finally, working our way back up, what are your resources? These are going to be your constraints that you're going to have to work within. But what materials, what people, and what technology do you have access to this summer that can help you get the kids doing the thing and help you communicate what you want to communicate? But those are our three sort of overarching questions as you're designing your content this summer that we've found really helped us with those three case studies we were talking about: Girls in Engineering, Summer Maker Camp 2020, and then our own classes and shows. We do have a few minutes left. I'd love to just open it up for questions.